All right, I think everything is on. We're ready to go. All right, hi everyone. Everyone got their notebooks out and ready? We got a lot to go over today. My schedule, usually every semester, and this semester in particular, is such that I teach classes that are always on Mondays and Wednesdays. So I'm here all day on Mondays and all day on Wednesdays. And this semester is no different. So I teach AVC 185, which is 3D modeling, in here in the morning from 8:30 to 11:10. Then this class, AVC 287, which is character animation. That's what everyone is here for, right? Yes, from 1 to 3:40, and then AVC 200, still in this room after this class, 4 to 6:40, which is animation and interactivity. So that's the schedule. We're here for the 1 to 3:40 block. My name is Casey Farina, Dr. Casey Farina. Just Casey is fine. I'm going to go through things kind of quickly today, especially this. Some of you may have already seen I put a lot of what I would usually cover on Monday, but we lost Monday because of Martin Luther King Day, which usually happens in the spring semester. We'll also lose President's Day coming up on February 16th, I believe. So it'll be content dense today. So keep that in mind. I usually try to be a little more relaxed. But we're going to try and catch up with a few things. But I did record a more extensive version of this that you should watch on the homepage of Canvas in terms of an introduction to just the nuts and bolts and logistics of how the class works. Because all my classes I run in a fairly similar fashion with obviously different content. So, yeah, we'll get back to what this means about the room and the schedule and the facilities in a little bit. And as a lot of you have probably seen, when the classes are listed on the schedule, the institutional policy is such that the most restrictive modality of the class is the one that has to be listed as the modality of the class within the scheduling apparatus. That's just apparently a limitation of our scheduling system. But I'm doing something a little bit different here. Those of you who've had my classes previously, last semester, it's going to be business as usual as we did things before. And so what I'm doing is referred to as multiple attendance options, MAO, but that's not an official institutional name as of this point. But here's what's happening. The class is happening just like it is right now in this room every Monday and Wednesday from 1 to 3:40 here. And then this is being streamed live to the class in my Maricopa YouTube channel. And in addition to being streamed live there, it also gets then archived under the live recording sections of that YouTube channel. So the attendance options are multiple. In person, live online, or asynchronously online. You can switch between modalities throughout the course of the semester as you see fit. For instance, if you're coming in person and you feel a little weird, like you might be getting sick, that's an opportunity to not come to school and perhaps stream the class online in interest of all of us not getting sick, right? So there's that. However, with this in mind, let me just say a few things here. These are listed in what I would recommend as far as orders of preference, okay? So I try to be super flexible. Why am I being super flexible and perhaps needlessly complicated with the format of this class? It's in order to make the class as accessible to the maximum number of students as possible, right? There are no multiple sections of this class. No one else teaches this class here. It's just me, right? All pretty much everything beyond the AVC 184 and AVC 100, that's almost certainly the case across the art department. Most of the art departments across the entire district are not large enough that there's section after section after section of much of the classes beyond the introduction level classes, and that's certainly true for the 200 level classes. So that being the case, there's only one section of the class. There's only one person teaching it, me. I try to make it as maximally accessible as possible. There's people who can't be here at this time in person. And I think it's important from an educational equity and availability standpoint to make the class available to those people. So hence this flexible way of going about this. However, with that being said, if you can be here in person, I strongly recommend doing that and continuing to do that throughout the course of the semester. Because I'm being super flexible like this, it makes it very available. But let me be clear that I think the experience of being in a room with people and students is a better learning experience than being isolated from other human beings online. So that's my opinion. Maybe I'm just getting too old, and that's reasonable, but that's definitely been the case. Not only was it my opinion before this current situation, but I have the data I can show you that the students who were here on a regular basis far and away do much better than the students who are not on, by and large. So not only does it a better actual experience, me, you, we're all here, you've carved out this chunk of time in your life to focus your time and attention on the content of this class. When it comes down to it, at the end of the day, that's all you have to spend is your time and attention. And to carve that out and spend that here across, twice a week over whatever it is, 16 weeks, that goes a long way to being successful not only in this class, but pretty much any class, right? But I do realize that there's people who have work conflicts or family conflicts or traveling conflicts, and it's impossible for them to be here in person. Hence, me offering the class like this, okay? Inevitably, those people who treat, even though they can't be here physically, they treat it as if they're going to be here, they're going to carve out the time and be here on the live stream, which is option B, right? You're still carving out the time, you just can't be here physically for whatever reason. That would be option B in terms of best experience. And then if those two things are just not possible, being able to have access to everything later and time shifting it is option C, asynchronously online. But it's the same class. We're all in this together. And we do a bunch of things all together every week, as you'll see here coming up. So if you are choosing to participate in the class asynchronously online, please be aware that it is not going to function like some other asynchronous online classes, which are kind of like a checklist. They can be a checklist of things on Canvas that you're sort of meandering through at your own leisure. This is not, even if you're participating online, this is not going to be that. We're trying to make the online experience as much like being in person as possible. Or I'm doing that because I think it's the best way to go about learning anything. So regardless of how you're participating, which modality you're opting into, and again, you can shift over the course of the semester. You don't need to notify me of that, right? It's on you. You guys are college students. You definitely have to commit to the idea that this is going to be 5 hours a week at least of dedicating your time and attention to this content and to this class, right? Again, some other online classes may not demand that level of time, attention, and scheduling. This one will. If that's not the way you want to learn, that is totally fine, but this is probably not a good option for you, this particular section of this particular class. So, yeah. Yes.
Would I be able to switch
Yes.
Because I take the bus,
Mhm.
and it'd save me a lot of money if it just came here every like Monday, and I just went online every Wednesday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's an option. Yeah. You again, we're in college here. We're not in high school. It's on you to address this how you see fit. I'm giving everybody the flexibility here in the interest of maximum availability, right? I think I'd rather have people learn than not learn. So, and again, there's not multiple sections of this where we can have, I don't know how many there are. There's 200 sections of English 101, right? So they can have dedicated online sections. They can have dedicated in-person sections. There's also probably like 40 people who teach that class. That's not the case with this. It's me and you now, here. That's it, right? So in order to extend that as far as possible and include as many people as possible, I am offering it in this way. So any other questions about this? Several of you have been in my classes before. You know, it'll be similar, exactly how we did it previously. Yes.
I didn't bring my laptop today.
That's fine. Yeah. Today, mostly about taking notes. So, yeah, even during this like nuts and bolts part, I would have my notebook out. In fact, we'll get to that just in a second here. The required things. The number one required thing is a notebook, right? And so, like actual, I would recommend paper, right? We'll address the computer situation in a minute. You can. Next week or the week after, I'll present some information about, I collated some research over the break about handwriting and the actual research about retention of information as it's related to handwriting, which is, I think, conclusive at this point. And so I realized handwriting was emphasized in a way in my education, which it probably was not in your education. And, you know, I'd just like to bring that to everyone's awareness. But we'll sidestep that for today. I think it's something you may want to reconsider about how to engage on. But yeah, using the Google Doc for now is great. Yeah, yeah. So, okay, is this making sense for everybody? Again, it may seem strange, and it is strange in that like it's not how many other people do it, but I've laid out my reasoning and thinking as for like why we're doing this, why I do it this way. I'm trying to maximize availability while also maximizing its quality and availability of what we're doing here. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay, awesome, good. Okay, so with this, we've got people all over the place. We've got people here in the room. Hopefully, those of you who are in the room here can make a decision to try to be in the room as much as possible over the course of the semester, right? Again, there's the class, like me saying stuff and you doing stuff and us talking about it. And then there's the experience of like you speaking to each other, knowing who each other are in class. In this field, that's really important, right? Like who are you going to be working with and for over the course of your career? Hopefully some other people in this room, right? And so a lot, when I think about to my time in school, you know, a lot of it was about establishing and maintaining relationships as much as it was about learning stuff. So especially at this point, everyone in here is in a 287 class. You've somewhat committed to being a digital creative professional. It's really, relationships are still really, really important in terms of actually doing this work and getting paid for it, right? Being good is one thing, but being able to know the other people who do this work and also contact them, hire them, have them hire you, right? It's not a 90-10 relationship in terms of like all of your skills are 90% and then the last little sprinkles on top are all the networking and professionalism. You know, would it be, a lot of students think that that's the way things should function. If I'm better at this, I should work more. I'm here to reveal that that is not often or even most of the time the case. A lot of times it just comes down to people who know other people, especially in this kind of situation, especially in this town, right? There aren't gigantic studios for game design in Phoenix, right? This is not a gigantic hub for those kind of things. So a lot of the work that happens in this town is very much job by job by job, much more of a freelance model for what happens here, which means that part of networking and relationships and knowing about what's going on and who's doing that becomes more critical here than it would be, getting hired by quote unquote a large studio and staying in that position for your whole career, right? I don't want to be the total bearer of bad news today, but like that model of doing that anywhere these days it hasn't been going well the last 5 years. So keep those kind of things in mind. We'll talk about this throughout. But in terms of everybody being all over the place and communicating with each other, we're going to have obviously the class, which is live streamed and archived. And then how do we talk to each other? We're going to have Discord. So we have a digital media arts Discord. For those of you who've taken a digital media arts course previously at Glendale, you probably are already on our Discord server. And then there's a channel, AVC 287, for this class. And Discord is where I like to funnel all of our, when we're not in class, we're not here, and you're not either, talking to me via so on the live stream, I have it up with the chat from YouTube. And so people who are there can access that way. And then obviously you guys are here in person. But not during that time. How do we talk to each other? Discord. Okay, it's just more immediate. I mean, how many of you already have Discord accounts, right? Almost everyone these days, right? And so all of the typical conversation about the class, I like to funnel into Discord, right? So technical and artistic questions over there, like Blender crashed and I can't do this, that, or this. Like that's a question for Discord. Does this look good? Does it feel like there's too much easing or not enough easing on this animation? That's a question for Discord, right? So all of those types of questions go to Discord. It's my opportunity to respond to you that way, and then also for you guys to respond to each other, right? You can, far and away, last semester there was a lot more of students answering other students' questions and me chiming in occasionally there. And so it gives you an opportunity to talk to each other there and the people who are not in the room, right? The whole design here is about trying to make it so that the people who can't be here in the room with us physically can still be in our virtual room learning community. Make sense? Okay. If you have a question or concern about your situation, I've had an emergency, I can't be here next week, something's coming up, that's an email, okay? So the Discord is where most of the communication happens. If you've got something that's particular to your situation, then send me an email. I try to keep everything separated in that fashion. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay, great. We'll get to the Discord nuts and bolts later. So the schedule, like I said, Monday and Wednesdays, 1 to 3:40, we're in here. We try to keep on this weekly cadence. Of course, this first week is a little bit anomalous because we need to get some things on the books, get everybody up to speed. And so each block here represents sort of the life cycle of one of our weekly creative projects. And of course, we're starting off on the wrong foot in that we've already lost Monday. But we'll catch up here with some condensed content for today. But the schedule here is that most of the time Mondays we're spending with me talking about whatever the new creative project is for that week, whatever the strategies are for doing that, the artistic examples, that kind of stuff, right? That happens mostly on Mondays. Wednesday, we have start off with a critique session for the previous week's creative project. And so with every creative project that you do, you'll be turning in the project, which in our case, certainly at the beginning is mostly going to be, blend files and rendered animations. And you'll be turning in a presentation video where you take 2 or 3 minutes, the time shifts a little bit, to show what it is you did in Blender, how you solved your artistic problems. If you have more questions, that's where you ask those things. And then in class, first thing on Wednesday, I play back all of those videos here so that you guys can see what everyone's doing. We can offer solutions to each other. We can see what everybody's doing. I mean, people were in class last semester. It's one of the best parts, right? You get to see what everyone else is doing, how they did all this stuff, and it's really good. So that at the beginning, it's not going to take forever because it's smaller things. But then as we go, that really does take up most of the time on Wednesdays in terms of like we're doing a much bigger project and there's a lot larger problems to solve and there's a lot more to say about what it is we're doing. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay. And so then the project starts on Monday, you turn it in on Tuesday, and then the following Wednesday is when we have the critique for that, right? So it kind of forms this overlapping grid of due dates and assignments, right? The thing that's maybe a little bit strange at first is that I'm starting to talk about the next assignment the day before you turn in the previous assignment, okay? Why do we have it like that? It's to give everybody the most amount of time on the weekend to grind on the project, right? So that's theoretically, in general, in terms of time availability to work, most of you seem mostly on the weekends. It's what we've come to here, right, in terms of making it work with the schedule. So if this seems a little cryptic, you'll get the gist of it as we continue on for sure. Great. Okay, in terms of the semester schedule, so we were off on Monday. Since I'm offering it in this format, right, where the primary experience is here now. When school is closed, we're closed. So Monday we didn't have class. February 16th, which I believe is a Monday, we won't have class. We're off on spring break. So that's the week of the 16th. And then our last class will be Wednesday, May 6th. And the final will be Wednesday, a week later, Wednesday, May 13th, where we'll be presenting our final portfolios. Does that make sense for everybody? Right, so in terms of scheduling, we function a lot more like an in-person thing in terms of like the school's closed, we're closed. Okay, does that make sense for everybody? Okay, good. Now, other things to keep in mind. This is the right one, yes. Required materials. Notebook. Having a physical book in which to write your notes, I think, is very important. Having someplace to store your work. So if a lot of you already have an external hard drive from previous classes, you can continue to use that. This is not something you should spend more than $100 on if you don't have one. Not only for this class, but all of your classes, having your work backed up with some sort of intentional data redundancy plan is a good idea. We'll talk more about how to specifically implement that later, but having an external hard drive. Computers, right. So in order to do animation and computer graphics, you need a computer that's going to do a little bit more than just write papers. We're going to be using Blender primarily throughout the semester, and we have some options here. On the homepage of the class, if you haven't already, this very short video can help you determine whether or not you have an NVIDIA, separate, discrete GPU in your computer if you're not already familiar with that. A lot of you have probably done streaming and gaming and are well aware of exactly what hardware is inside your computer. Some of you maybe not. But we want to have a separate, discrete graphics processing unit in order to be able to work in some sort of relatively efficient fashion here. And once you figure out exactly what's in your computer, if you've got an NVIDIA GPU in there that's like, I mean, my one older computer has like a 20 series card in it at home, and it still would work fine for most of what we're going to do in this class. But anything within the last few years that has a discrete GPU will be good. So that's option A. You own a computer that meets these requirements, awesome, you're good to go for class. Option B, the institution, Glendale Community College, has purchased a fleet, I'm not exactly sure how many that is, but it's a lot, of laptops that are available for you to check out for free for the semester. And the link to do that is here on the homepage, right here. And these are checked out not like library books. You check them out at the beginning of the semester, you get to use it for the entire semester, and then return it at the end of the semester, right? So, and if you fill out the form and indicate that you are in this class, AVC 287, they'll make sure that you receive one of the good computers, the ones that are going to be able to hack it for this class, okay? Because they do have other computers that they check out that are not suitable for this. However, the problem here with option B is that the institution has made all of these laptops available for free, which is great, but it's not, we don't have unlimited infinite resources here. So there is a limited number of them. If you're going to do that and check this out, I would recommend filling out that form ASAP, right? Yesterday, to make sure that you're on the list and to make sure that, you start the process because, what's your name? Yes. Anthony. As Anthony said, you already filled this out, right? But they arranged for you to pick it up on Thursday, tomorrow? Yes. Okay. Yeah. They just hand them out every day. They have specific days that they're going to do this. So it's not immediate, right? So you want to if you're going to do this, start the process now so that you can have something soon. So keep that in mind. Yes.
What's like the
NVIDIA, yeah.
What is that?
So that's the graphics card in the computer. So if you're a little bit not too sure about that, this is where I go through explaining all of this, right? So check out everything on the homepage if you haven't already there. But you want to have a discrete computer graphics processor in the computer. That's right. So I would watch and take some notes on this one in terms of explaining the difference between the two things and where to find it on your computer. If you have a Mac, does anyone have a Mac? You do? Okay.
Only MacBook. I have an actual PC at home.
Okay. All right. So you're fine. Okay. You'll be able to certainly use that in class, and then when you need the horsepower, you can just use the PC or whatever.
I have a laptop, but it's a little bit older.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know how that will work.
Okay, if you're not super sure, I would fill out the form for the laptop, school laptop, and so that you've got that in your back pocket in case, right? The first couple of weeks, as we're getting started with some we're not going to do a bunch of crazy stuff right off the bat, right? And so the first couple of weeks, it'll almost on anything, you could make it work, right? The problem is students think that we'll continue on that trajectory the entire semester, and we won't. We'll start doing some heavier lifting, and then the computer they had that was working really stops being a viable tool at some point, right? Which is why you want to address this now. So there's that. I haven't made a recommendation yet. I'll probably post something on Discord at some point. If you have either extra FAFSA money or a crazy amount of like wanton disposable income and you want to buy a machine, but you don't know what you want, like I usually recommend something, but obviously it changes every semester as they put new stuff out. But you do not have to buy something for the class, okay? Like I'm just saying that's an option. Some people do it and they always ask me, what should I get? And so I usually post something there. Does that make sense? Okay. And then option D, look around. All of these computers are like pretty good. These are good machines. And this lab here, when is this lab going to be open? I don't know quite yet for the entire semester, okay? Like we have to see how the first week shakes out with my classes in here. I mean, I'm the only person in here Monday and Wednesdays, but other people teach in here on the other days. I can tell you for sure, I'm in here, like you saw my schedule, I'm in here all day, Monday, Wednesday, right? And the other classes I teach are just like this in terms of like some people are here and some people are not. And so I haven't had a class where it was like standing room only and there was there were no open computers. And so if you want to be in here working even during my other classes on Mondays and Wednesdays, that's fine. So that works out for everybody. So 4 options there in terms of figuring everything out. Trenton on the chat asks about, does it have to be NVIDIA? No. For this class, if it's a computer that has an AMD GPU, if you know what that is, then that would also, for the most part, work fine. Like there's not going to be a bunch of issues there. I don't believe so. Okay, does this array of options for this class work? Okay, like I said, you want to solve this soon, but in terms of getting rolling the first week, you should be able to get going with everything, with almost any machine. This is part of the, we're going to primarily use Blender as our tool in this class, and one of the nice things about that is that it does run somewhat on almost any kind of hardware. It's just once you start asking it to do more stuff, then having some reasonable hardware works well. Okay, any questions about that? Everybody good? Okay, great. This is an art class. I'll present artistic examples throughout the course of the semester, and it's art. It may contain images and or ideas that some people consider controversial or offensive. I think about these things before I show them to you, so keep that in mind. I'm not just sort of randomly selecting things to look at, but the views represented in the artwork do not represent the views, my views in some cases, or the views of Glendale Community College or Maricopa County Community Colleges. So keep that in mind as we continue on throughout the course of the semester. We talked about this. The couple other sort of like suggested things here would be, let's see. We're going to be using Blender, and so if you're on a laptop, a mouse is pretty much necessary. Trying to do everything with a trackpad in these programs, and especially in Blender, is really like not fun or great. And so it doesn't need to be a fancy mouse at all. I mean, you can literally grab the $2 mouse with a USB out of the bin at Goodwill, and that would be much better than trying to use the trackpad all the time. So it literally just standard mouse, 2 buttons and a scroll wheel in the middle, like any mouse made within the last 10 years will have. That'll be useful, right, if you're on a laptop. And then also keyboard here. So again, if you're on a laptop, the way Blender is set up, the numpad keys end up being super useful to control the view and the camera and everything in Blender. And so having those numpad keys makes it a little bit easier. So even if you're on a laptop, again, having a cheapo keyboard that you could plug in may be a little bit simpler, right? There's some things we can do, and I'll show them to you here, about making the numbers along the top function the same, but it's definitely a little bit, I really, since we've been doing Blender exclusively over the past 2 years, like I really make sure that every computer I have has the extra numpad on it. It's just a little bit more convenient, especially for that program, the way they have the shortcuts set up. So those would be two other things to keep in mind. And in fact, the simpler the mouse, the better, right? Getting some fancy mouse with a bunch of programmable buttons and macros and stuff is probably going to be like more of a hassle than just a regular mouse. You have a question, Anthony? You're good? Okay. Everybody good? All right. Great. Back over here. Okay. Like a grading is fairly standard here. Our weekly projects get averaged out for 75% of the grade, and then the final portfolio presentation is the remaining quarter of the grade. I tend to be a generous grader because that Wednesday time when we're talking about our work and I'm giving you feedback, that's where the value is in the class, right? Here's what you did. Here's what I think about it. Here's what that's the whole thing, right? Once you get out of this system and out of school, the opportunities to like have someone like, here's the thing I made, and now someone else is going to devote all their attention to talking about this thing. That doesn't happen all the time. You should take advantage of that while it's here. And so the class emphasizes the creative work, right? That's the most important part moving on from school. When you go to work in this industry, no one is even remotely concerned with your grades, right? No one has ever asked me, or no one has ever seen my work and been like, oh, I really like that. Can I see your transcripts? Right? No one says that, right? They want to see your creative portfolio. In all of the classes in the Digital Media Arts program, we've specifically designed to feed projects into a creative body of work that you have when you're done here at Glendale Community College. That's what everything is pointed at. I mean, at this point, I mean, this is a 287 class. I imagine a lot of you have experienced this in your other classes, right? It's about creating work that you can use in a portfolio. Here's some things I've actually made, right? I didn't learn about making a thing. I made things. That's what we're doing here. So we're actually going to make stuff like every week. So that's what we're looking at here. As such, like I said, every week it changes a little bit, but you're turning in blend files, maybe a render or a movie, and then your presentation video, which is, here's the thing I made, I had these problems. The weekly presentation video is the best place to ask questions because you can have Blender open and be like, I've clicked on this and nothing happened. That's a common question, right? Or I clicked on this and the wrong thing happened. And when you're able to tell me what's happening and I'm able to see your screen, like that it makes it much easier to solve problems versus like posting on Discord, Blender doesn't work. Okay, right? Like, everyone in here knows enough to know that like it's tough to help you out when we're starting from there. Like I'm gonna have some more questions about whatever it is that's going wrong, right? So this weekly presentation video, and then obviously or implicitly, you need to be okay with sharing your work with the rest of the class. We're doing it on a weekly basis. In the schedule that we saw before, I was calling it our weekly critique. Some students really get apprehensive about that word. It's just the word that we use culturally in the art department to talk about a feedback session, right? Where we're just talking about the thing. What do we like? What do we think we can improve? Just because it's called a critique doesn't mean we're all going to be critical. That's not what we're doing here. In fact, just the opposite. They tend to be, I think, overwhelmingly positive experiences for everybody, right? It's just the word that we use for feedback here in the art department. So with that in mind, yeah, you need to be comfortable sharing your work with everybody else. So occasionally that's been an issue for somebody, and if you're really not into that, this may not be a good fit. Great. Late work is accepted at my discretion. Okay, we have this Discord channel. We have a Discord channel, and it makes talking to each other at any time pretty easy. Like, I keep it on my phone so I can see what people are saying. I'm sure you guys have it on your phone, all that kind of thing. But what I'm not committing to is like responding to Discord messages whenever, right? That's not like, you guys can talk to each other on this. It's not like it gets shut down on the weekend. But, you know, I'm primarily participating under what would be like normally regular business hours during the week, right? So keep that in mind. Very well. We're creating a portfolio of work. A lot of the rest of the syllabus is boilerplate kind of stuff. I have to provide the terms of service and privacy policy for all the stuff that we use. We all have to have AI policies now in our syllabi. There's not a lot of, in fact, there's really no writing assignments in this class, right? Mostly you're preparing these videos each week about what it is that you did. Everyone seems to do that very conversationally. It seems to have worked no problem. And so the opportunities for you to ask ChatGPT to write your essay for this class are just frankly non-existent. And so with that in mind, we may talk about some of the other tools that are available here throughout the course of the semester and what this kind of technology means for the art industry and digital art industry in general. But if we talk about using something and you end up using part of it in some sort of assignment, I'm just asking for complete transparency. Like, I used this thing to do this. Part of the, part of the friction in the conversation around artificial intelligence, first of all, I don't like that term. Like, I think if it was all just called machine learning, it would probably help people mentally frame it in a more constructive way. Is that people are not very specific, right? I think partially because they're not very specific because it got labeled with artificial intelligence, and everyone initially conceives of it as this like omnipotent black box that just conjures magical stuff of one way or another, and that's not really what it does. It does a bunch of different things, and so we'll talk about that. If like the class changes every semester, maybe we'll use a few things, and there's more and more of these types of tools being built into some of the programs. And so if you do use anything at any point, notating that in your Canvas comments would be what I specifically ask of everybody there, right? Not trying to pass off something, just being completely transparent about what it is you're doing and how it is you're doing it. Does that make sense there? Okay, right. Let's see, do we miss anything else on the syllabus? I don't think so. Okay, great. So here, as some of you have probably already noticed, tomorrow, Thursday, 1/22, the syllabus acknowledgement quiz is due. It should be a very easy one-question quiz for everyone there, right? Did you read the syllabus? In which case you can say yes, and then you're done. So do that by tomorrow, okay? If you don't get that done by the end of the week, I have to drop you from the class. The institution is adamant about making sure that all the people registered for the class are actually in the class. There's apparently way more fake students now, like virtual digital ghosts that register for class as part of some sort of what seems like to me a very convoluted scheme to get student aid and then never come to class. I don't know. Seems like a lot of work, but even for free student aid or whatever it is they're doing. Anyways, because of that, we need to make sure that we don't have other, fake students in the class. You taking this little bit acknowledgement quiz essentially is like the digital version of, yes, I am here. I am an actual being taking this class and not some sort of financial aid scam bot of some kind. But yeah, it was really rare before, but we had some meetings last week, and apparently there's some classes where it's been like 50% of the class turned out to be like fake people of some kind. I don't know. It's very strange. Okay. And then on Friday, the technology orientation assignment is due. This is just about you getting your computer set up for everything. Even if you don't have the computer you're going to use in perpetuity throughout the rest of the semester, you can do this and then transfer all of your licenses later. Most of the stuff we use is free to use. So Miro is this online whiteboarding tool that you see me using here, and I think it's great. I really like the fact that it's like this infinitely large space where I can just sort of like organize knowledge in the spatial fashion and be able to zoom in and zoom out on it. I think this is very useful. There's a bunch of other tools that kind of do the same thing. So if you have some other one that you prefer, that's fine. But, and then we'll use OBS, right? So those of you who've done any sort of streaming stuff before, anybody have a streaming identity account or, yeah. So you use OBS?
Yeah, I did it last semester with the other classes.
Okay, great, cool. And so that's what I use to broadcast the class. And that's my recommendation for you for your weekly presentation videos. OBS is, quite frankly, like in general, a very rock solid piece of software. And once you get it set up, it just kind of stays that way. And it makes, it has the least amount of computational overhead. Because when you're presenting, just like when you're streaming, right, you want most of the horsepower of your computer to be directed at the game you're playing, right? Not the broadcasting of you playing the game. And so we have a similar situation here where you want most of the computer dedicated to showing whatever it is that you made that week and not wrapped up in trying to record that. And so I have a tutorial there about downloading and installing OBS for those of you who don't already have that ready to go. And then your first video this week is just like a very short introduction of you to the rest of the class. Okay. Hi, I'm so-and-so. Here's a piece of art I made. I'm interested in learning this. I have some questions there. There's a script. Okay. When you're making your videos, notice that I'm in the lower, as we're looking at the screen, I'm in the lower right-hand corner, right? So this is my corner. Get out of my corner. Right? When you record your videos, go over there on that side. It just ends up being really weird if you also use the lower right corner and then I play it back in class and we're both like on top of each other in the lower right-hand corner. It's just like kind of awkward and weird. So stay out of my corner, go on the other corner over there, right? So that corner. It just makes it much, much easier when we play stuff back to be able to see everybody's work. Yes. You're good? Okay, all right.
Do I have to update it for this year for the OBS?
No, probably not. Yeah, like, yeah, there's I honestly don't even know what version this is. Like, we're only using like the core OBS functionality here, right? If you want to get in, like, this is a deep rabbit hole, right? For those of you who have entertained or done any streaming, right? This program does a lot of stuff, right? You can do full on like television level broadcast work from OBS, but I'm not asking you to do that. Some of the students really got into it last semester, like they got their like and subscribe graphics playing during the videos, and then a couple of them made like animated avatars that they would have down there, like a little seal with a cowboy hat and stuff. And so yeah, if you want to have fun with that, go ahead. But I just stepped through the basics of setting up essentially a situation setup close to what I have here. So that's part of getting this going. Downloading Discord. Most of you already have a Discord account. So I'm not asking you to sign up for a new Discord account with your school email. You can just add our Discord server to whatever list of other servers you already participate in. However, the one thing I do want you to do is there's instructions right here for changing your server nickname on our server to your name as you would like to be addressed in class, right? And so that way, when people are speaking on our Discord server, I have a chance of knowing who's who here, right? If we don't do this, everyone's pre-established Discord handle is what appears in the stream. And it's just, it's one thing for me to learn everybody's name. It's another thing for me to learn everyone's name and everyone's fairly arbitrary Discord handle, right? And so I ask that you change, again, you don't have to change your whole account. You can be identified however you like on the other servers. Just on our server, change it to, if you want to be called Joe, then just change it to Joe on our server, your server nickname. And this is a link to how to do that if you're not familiar. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay, right. And so that's the link there. This introduction video, for those of you who have been in my class in the past I played everybody's introduction video in class. It takes too long. And so what I'm going to have everybody do is make your introduction video and then post it on Discord. However, this is going to present a technical challenge. It's kind of like a little bit of a quiz here at the beginning, is that do not post the video to the Discord server, okay? Your video that you record, it's going to be like 2 minutes. It's going to be HD probably. It's going to be too big for the Discord server. I don't exactly know what the upload limit is right now. It seems to shift occasionally, but it'll be too big, okay? And I am not, I repeat, I am not telling you to go get Nitro or whatever it is that Discord tries to sell everybody, right? You don't.
Hashtag ad.
Hashtag what? Yeah, don't do that. What I'm asking you to do is post this introduction video to your school YouTube and then just link to it in the Discord server. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, right. So on Discord, we're able to talk. We can upload screenshots, static pictures, pretty much as we want. That all seemed to work just fine. But it's not the place where you can just attach a 90 megabyte video. It's not going to let you do that, right? It will say like either get Nitro, and again, you do not have to get Nitro, right? There's a bunch every semester. Someone's like, oh, I have to buy Nitro. No, you do not have to buy Nitro. Okay, you can just link to the video that you posted on your YouTube channel, right? And so if you're not aware, if you log into your email, I suppose this is the easiest way to get there, and then come over here and then go here, you have your school, the YouTube account that's connected to your school Google identity. And so this is where I would want you to post that video. You can make it unlisted so that it's just the people in Discord who are going to see it, and that should be fine.
Do we have to do it through YouTube, or if we can compress the file size of the video and put it on there, would that work too?
Yeah, let's say it's a test. I want to know that you know how to upload to YouTube.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, and in general, I don't want people posting videos over there because that always presents a problem, right? So just the technical problem. I wish we had enough space over there, but it's like a free thing, and obviously if everyone was just jamming a bunch of huge videos up there, it would be a problem for them. Yeah.
I think the limit is 16.
16? Yeah. Okay.
There's a website that automatically just
Yeah, well, I'll spend an incredibly boring class talking about video compression later on. So, hold on to your butts. It's going to be exciting. Yeah.
Does it have to be your school YouTube? Because last semester I just used like my personal one.
It's fine with me. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Diana asks if she has multiple classes with me, can she use the same video for introduction? Yes, you can. Great. So over here. Download Blender. Whatever version we're currently at, something over 5. Yeah, for those of you paying attention to this stuff, Blender 5 came out, in the fall, and now we're on, so here the official LTS version is 5.01, so that's fine. One of the nice parts about Blender is it's not a gigantic program. It's not like gigabytes and gigabytes and gigabytes, and so you can have multiple versions of Blender installed on the same machine at the same time. And here at school, I'll be using 5 something. They'll probably release 2 versions during the course of the class, right? So, I mean, allow me to timestamp the first time I make this joke. The good news is that they're changing Blender all the time. The bad news is that they're changing Blender all the time, right? So there's a lot of things that cut both ways like that, and this is one of them. Okay, so that's the link to install Blender. If you don't already have an Epic account, we may use some Unreal Engine towards the end of the semester. We'll see how things unfold. I change the classes every semester. Keeps me interested, keeps the class interesting. Like my curriculum is constantly shifting. The tools in this space change rapidly. And then Adobe Creative Cloud, most of you have already taken another GCC DMA class. So you've got the Adobe Creative Cloud thing figured out on your home machine. You're able to log in. Everybody, for those of you who don't know, if you have a DMA, Digital Media Arts class at GCC, you qualify to use the school paid for Adobe Creative Suite at home on your home machine, but you need to log in using your Maricopa account. This is their tutorial about doing that. Once you get it done the first time, then it stays logged in and you're usually pretty good. But there can be problems with this. So this is why I put it on the first week. If you run into an issue, don't freak out. We've run into issues where some students didn't get added to our list of people who should be able to use Adobe Creative Cloud. And if that's the case, then we send an email to someone over there, right? So the school IT department, called the Office of Information Technology, is on the other side of the building over there, like the big glass part. That's where all of the IT offices are. And so all of that is what you're doing for Friday, right? And part of what you're doing here as well is commenting on your fellow classmates' video introductions on Discord. So if everybody waits to the last minute to post your video introduction on Discord, no one can comment on anyone else's video introduction on Discord. So, try and, especially if you want people to give you some feedback on your introduction, if you get it up there first, then there'll be lots of people commenting on it. If you're up there last, maybe somebody's like, great, cool, nice to meet you. Yeah, that's it. So try to do that part of it soon, even before it's due. Any questions about this? Okay, great. Back here. think we're good. Okay, that's good. All right. I'm Casey Farina, as I said before. So I've been here like over 15 years now. I've been residential faculty in the art department for over 10 years. I've been doing this a while through many, many facilities and iterations. Yeah, it's a wonderful job. I love teaching here. I love meeting the students every semester. Working with everybody to make stuff over the course of the semester is incredibly fun and rewarding. Even if some days it sounds like I really don't like it, I still do deep down inside enjoy it. And this has been great. I'll show you more of the things I've done over the years coming up after you guys post your introductions. And I told you my schedule and my availability there. Like I said, most of the time, I have official office hours in between my morning class and this class here. But how many of you have ever gone to see a professor during office hours? Yeah, it's usually not many anymore, especially with the way we're doing the class, right? I'm available via Discord. I'm available most times. And then also, to let you know, this class does have an online tutor, Fabio Bruzzese. And so he is going to be available through Discord on Tuesdays and Wednesdays from 10 to 4. And yeah, you can screen chat with him, so you can show him your screen and he can show you his screen, all that kind of stuff. And then by appointment, if you can't make any of those times work. And yeah, that's his preliminary office hours right now, or his preliminary availability. And so as the semester goes on and we get a better idea of what's going on in my classes and what's going on in the other classes, then maybe we'll adjust this. He's also going to make a video introducing himself and put that up on the Discord channel, so look for that there. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay, great. I introduced myself. Now let's go this way. What's your name? Lawson. Okay, and then let's say your name, what program you're in, what school you're at if you're not a GCC person, and then something you're hoping to learn in this class. All right, so Lawson. So which program are you in? Digital animation. Great. And then what are you GCC or are you at a different school? You're here. Okay, great. And then what's something you want to learn in this class? Okay, great. Rigging characters. Super. We'll definitely talk about that. Awesome. Welcome, Lawson. And
My name is Jose.
hi, Jose.
Visual media and arts major. Been in this school for like years.
Okay.
I want to learn how to use Blender. Like I've been wanting to use Blender for 2 days.
Okay. And yet, have you not used it much in your other classes?
No, I've been using Cinema 4D in like the previous class I had with you.
Okay. Yeah, so that was a while ago then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Lawson, Jose, and Anthony.
Yes, I'm Anthony. I think I'm in the animation course as well.
Okay. So not to pick on Anthony but this is a common thing for everybody. If you're not 100% sure exactly which program you're in and what that program requires, the beginning of the semester is a really good time to sort of get some clarity about that. Because this is a common, again, I'm not picking on you, Anthony. I'm just sort of saying to everybody here, because this is a common thing. Like, I have students who come up to me and they're like, well, I started a program and now they changed the requirements. That doesn't apply to you, okay? So this is maybe not well known. The program that you're doing at GCC, regardless, or any of the Maricopa County Community Colleges, the program that you're enrolled in, when you start, is frozen in time. And those remain the requirements if you do not change programs for you to graduate. Okay, the school cannot move the goalposts, right? Now you can start in one program, switch, and then at the time you switch, you're essentially signing up for whatever the requirements are in whatever you switched into, right? But the programs do change as we're trying to make them better. But for everybody, if you're a little bit hazy on like what it is you need to graduate or all these kind of things, this would be a good time to reach out to your advisor. How many of you guys have seen your advisor, let's say this year, right? Either if you're at GCC, it's going to be Jason, right? Dr. Beckerman, or Jessica, or Aubriana, right? If you haven't checked in with them within the last few months, I would send them an email. Obviously this week, they're inhumanly busy, but if you send them an email, they're all incredibly responsible people, and they will make time to meet with you to get you clear on exactly what it is you need to be doing to graduate. Okay, so a little bit of housekeeping there. Yes, Anthony. So digital media arts at GCC.
Yeah, and I want to learn about good animation and I'll be able to implement it in my own animation.
Okay, great. Hold on, someone's coming in the live stream here. Okay, no, okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, so Lawson, Jose, Anthony, and what's that?
I'm Ivan.
Okay,
I'm here for like animation.
okay. And then which program are you in? The animation program?
Yeah, in general, yeah.
Okay, great.
Although this is not more like a select. This is not like a mandatory class for me. It's more like an optional class.
Right, right.
So, and I'm here just because I want to get better. I want to like learn how to do 3D. I want to make some. I'm learning 2D, but I also want to learn like 3D stuff.
Okay, and all four of you are housed at this institution. You're not at a different school, right? Because this is the other thing that students are not occasionally aware of is that the degree programs exist. They're the same across all the Maricopa County Community College schools, right? And so that was not always the case. Like within my time here, that change was made. And so when all of the degrees became aligned, that meant that students could take classes that were not being offered at their home institution at some other Maricopa County school, and that would count towards their degree. How many of you had to take a class at a different school?
That's what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, it happens way more now because the degrees are aligned and because there's a lot of online classes. And so a lot of you, like how many of you, the class that you took somewhere else was an online class? Yeah, okay. Not you went somewhere else, like physically?
Both of them are physically.
Yeah, okay.
I'm taking one this semester, and the next semester I have to take another one physically. I
Okay.
wish there was online ones, I would do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's, again, part of the reason for my format the way it is to also facilitate this exact position. Yes, and so what was your name one more time?
I'm Evan.
Evan, okay.
Ivan.
Ivan, okay, great. And then what's something you want to learn?
Like I said, I want to learn how to like be good at 3D animation.
Okay,
Design anything.
great. So, Ivan, Anthony, Jose, Lawson, and
My name is Edward.
Edward.
I'm currently doing the game production certificate,
Mm-hmm.
and I took this class because I just wanted to do more 3D animation.
Okay, great. And you're doing that at GCC, the game production certificate? Okay. And are you, for the certificate, are you doing the art focus or the?
Yeah, game art.
Okay, great. Edward, right? Okay, awesome. And Desmond?
Desmond Edwards. I'm doing the video production degree in the game art classification, and school here, CC Community College, and the thing I want to learn is I want to learn how to do the things in 3D animation for video game industry. So yeah.
Okay, great. Desmond, Edward, Ivan, Anthony, Jose, Lawson, and
Hi, my name is Alec. I'm studying animation and 3D media here at UCC. I'm
Great. Awesome. Alec was in class last semester. And Crimson.
Well, last time you went through everyone's names, I thought you were doing it again. I wasn't prepared. So my name is Crimson. I'm also doing animation and time-based media. I go to school in general here at GCC, but last semester I had to take an extra class at Australia, which was annoying.
Mm.
But it's close to my house, so I didn't care about that.
And did you have to, that was in person, you had to travel to
Yeah.
Australia?
But Australia is closer than here, but here has more of the classes that I need, so I'm not officially registered here. And they're like, oh, well, to match with your schedule, you should take one class over there. And I was like,
I was super confused because I had Australia. Like,
oh yeah,
you have to
Yeah.
travel to
I was about to
Australia.
say, like,
I have to
how
travel
long
to
is
Yes.
Australia every Wednesday in order to get one of my
Yeah, yeah.
classes.
We just opened a new branch campus in Australia.
Glendale Community College. Is there Glendale in Australia?
Maricopa Melbourne Community College.
Yeah, that would work. And one thing I really want to learn is I like modeling the characters, and I want to get better at also rigging because, yeah, I didn't do that good last semester.
Great. You got it done. You got it done. All right. Crimson, Alec, Desmond, Edward, Ivan, Anthony, Jose, Lawson, and
My name is Amy. I'm in animation and like here at GCC, and I want to get better at modeling and animating my character.
cool. Great. Welcome, Amy. And
Mark.
Mark.
Yes.
And so are you here, Mark, at GCC?
No, I'm at PVCC.
You're at PVCC. Okay, great. And then which program are you in there?
It's like game design art.
Mm-hmm.
The program.
Okay, so you've taken a class with Professor Tolentino, probably?
Yes.
Yes.
He's awesome.
Yep, she's a great friend. Lisa's great. All right, and
I'm Arlinka. I'm a video game production major here at GCC. So I've been teaching myself rigging, but I want to learn how to animate my approaches and specialize approaches specifically. But I also like making props and characters for games.
great. Arlinka, Mark, right? Mark,
Yes.
Mark, Amy, Crimson, Alec, Desmond, Edward, Ivan, Anthony, Jose, and Lawson. Okay, I think I got it. We'll see. And then online, we have Trenton, and looks like Diana's on there for right now. Great. And then you'll be meeting everybody, right? Regardless of modality on Discord, right? So that's part of the reason we're putting up these introductions on Discord. Awesome. Okay. I feel like we're pretty good here. Mm, mm. Okay, let's start here. Everybody got their notebooks ready? Here we go. All right. So, certainly for today, maybe a little bit of next week, we're going to be, let me do this. There we go. And scroll this down. All right. So, our guiding principles throughout the semester, we're going to be making things move, making characters move. Before we start making characters move, we just need to understand the principles for making anything move on screen. And a little bit of the history here. On the bottom, this is on the front page. The reason I put it on the front page is to sort of like force you to look at it every time you log into the class. Is I have what I like to refer to often throughout the semester this is what I think is a really good modern framing of this idea, the 10 principles of motion design. And so just like anything else, the thinking and framing and consideration of the field of animation changes over time, just like it does for, math or social studies or anything else. And so this 10 principles of motion design, this is sort of a reorganizing of, you may have heard of the 12 principles of animation. So I've got a couple good links here. First of all, this 10 principles of motion design is the reframing as organized by Jorge Canast. And so he's a wonderful animator and motion designer who runs his own studio. Anytime there's a link on the page or in the assignment, I would click on that. So I've linked to his individual portfolio here, and also let me just make sure this is not going to play back. Yeah, there we go. This is a reel, REEL, of some of his older work about applying the principles of motion design to a variety of corporate and client-facing projects. Also, more importantly, he is the director or principal creative person at a motion design studio, and that studio is called Ordinary Folk. In terms of, I discussed earlier the idea that like large design and motion design studios, as they existed even 20 years ago, are not as prevalent, right? Why? There's a lot of answers to that question. The business environment is such that it's that much harder to sort of run even a medium-sized institution with employees in a physical space, all those kind of things. But one of the ones that endures is Ordinary Folk. There's a bunch of other ones I'll call your attention to throughout the course of the semester. And so almost all of the work that we see here on the Ordinary Folk page is clearly related to and stylistically inspired by a lot of Jorge Canast's work. And his work really places at the forward, it showcases the fundamental principles of motion design. So this is a really great portfolio. I'll encourage you to look at this. And in fact, I think we'll probably do a little bit of analysis of this, maybe not next week, but the week after, in terms of looking at it and trying to identify what's happening where, because I think it's a really great and varied body of work. And so that's the person responsible for this reframing of the 12 principles of animation. The 12 principles of animation are codified in a text called The Illusion of Life. And so this book is, not so much an instructional book as like a historical record of a lot of the original hand-drawn animators at Disney, as Disney is making some of the very first animated feature films of the time. And so part of the book, I've also linked to the book itself right here. And so this is a PDF of the entire text. It's an older text that's available to everybody. And it's also available on the Internet Archive. So especially older books, I'm not sure everyone is always aware, like things that have entered into the public domain. The public domain is like once copyright expires on something, then it can be more freely distributed outside of copyright law. I am not a lawyer. That's the basic mechanism. How long it takes copyright to expire, who has copyright, those are again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not offering legal advice. I'm just explaining the basic mechanism here. The things where that's no longer the case, some of them are available on the Internet Archive. And so this is a really great resource all around for historical information. I'm not sure everyone is always aware of. And for instance, the text is available here in a variety of digital formats, which is great. I already downloaded and linked to a PDF format of that is here. So we'll come back to that, but having this, where is this? There. Yeah, in this case, it's the entire 500-page text is here. So if you haven't even cracked this book open previously, this is a really, really great text in terms of, if nothing else, even if you're going to completely devote your entire career to computer animation, this is, a record of some of the people who started doing this at the not the very, very beginning, but close to the beginning of the concept of doing this. And so we'll come back and look at some of this. The size, I think, is a little squished, so some of the imagery had to get down-sampled. And also, I didn't want to put the gigantic file up there, but if you grab the original PDF, which is over 300 megabytes, then it'll have the higher quality stuff in there. So that's all right there. But, for instance, the original 12 principles of animation as defined here, squash and stretch, anticipation, staging, straight ahead action or pose to pose, follow through and overlapping action. Some of you may have seen this before, right? This is Edward Muybridge's, one of the first moving pictures ever captured. We'll look, there's a really great publicly available documentary about this, as well as one of my absolute favorite books by Rebecca Solnit about the story behind capturing this. Slow in, slow out, arc, secondary. The point here is that we had 12 to start, right? And as these were all sort of solidified during the time where there are no computers, right? Or very, very few computers. And using computers changes the way people approach doing this. And no one had sort of done it in a way that was widely accepted, reconsidered these principles with a modern lens. And so this 10 principles of motion design is sort of a modern reframing of the original 12, like which ones are still applicable and how are they still applicable. And so we'll be using this as one of our guiding, ideas throughout the entire semester, guiding principle, like comes back to this again and again and again. And like one of the ways it's been reframed here is like one of the 12 original principles is appeal, which there's more to say, but the idea that an image should be appealing. Yes, of course, right? Like people make media. Ideally, you want people to potentially consume said media, right? And so it should appeal to them in some way, right? Now, the idea of, well, what do people consider appealing? Well, that's a much more complicated question, right? In terms of like, who are we talking about? What does appealing mean? These are all much, much larger topics, right? And so, for instance, one of the things Knaus does here is that, sort of number 10 is the idea of appeal. It's sort of, it's like a box around the entire thing. If you notice, this is only 9. The idea that 10 is this framing idea that's more of like this overarching principle, right? And these individual 9 are more about what specifically can we do to manipulate motion on the screen, moving things over some amount of time, some series of frames. So I'll come back to this again and again and again, and we'll look at how to take this apart and apply it on individual objects first, and then multi-part objects as we move on. Does it make sense so far? Yeah. And then, yeah, I want to present something a little bit later on that I'm still sort of formulating in terms of I think these are really good guiding principles from an artistic standpoint, but you could take one more step back and think of a more fundamental framing that really gets back to the idea of some of the fundamental laws of physics in terms of Newton's laws of motion and whatnot, and then how our artistic intentions for representing those ideas in time can be manipulated, and how they're being manipulated. The examples of them are being manipulated here. Sound good? Okay, great. So we're going to work towards here, timing, spacing, and rhythm here, if we look at some of this. The entire GIF graphic here is from Canaston. I think these do, a relatively good job in terms of some sort of multi-step animation that helps to illustrate these principles. And so right off the bat, there's a level of cognitive dissonance in that principle number 1 is timing, spacing, and rhythm, which is like, well, that seems like 3 things. Like, why is number 1 3 things? Like, immediately it's like, that's maybe conceptually not, frictionless. But we're talking about moving something through space here. And in order to do that, we sort of need to have a basic environment in which that can happen. So time needs to exist, right? Something happens and something else happens. It needs to exist in some kind of space, right? One of the fundamental issues for animation is that space 2-dimensional, or is that space 3-dimensional, right? One of the things that we'll confront often in the computer is that the computer, the way the programs are built, kind of assumes 3-dimensionality, and two-dimensional stuff is seen as like, well, yeah, it's just 3-dimensional stuff. You just don't worry about the third number, right? But when you get down to analyzing how the program actually understands the information, it's still understanding it in 3-dimensional information, not just 2-dimensional information. And then rhythm, again, is a word that's more of a I would say 1 or 2 steps above timing and spacing conceptually, in that rhythm is the idea that time and space exist, and now we are distributing something through those 2 dimensions here, right? So in the past, like I said, we switched to Blender, 2 years ago. Before that, we used a program called Cinema 4D, right? And I've been talking about 2D, I've been talking about 3D, and now Cinema 4D. Well, 4, like, what's the 4th dimension? In this case, their 4th dimension was time, right? So it's not like they invented that. They just slapped the label on it in terms of like, yeah, it's 3D plus time, that's 4D, right? And you can conceive of it that way. Like, time is another dimension that's available to you, but our ability to manipulate that 4th dimension is somewhat constrained, the way we understand existence, right? We just get to go forward in time. We can sort of make things that look as if time has been manipulated, but the fundamental progression of that dimension remains, sort of locked for all of us. Make sense so far? Okay, cool. So let's look at this first one here in terms of understanding the basic idea that we have frames that are happening over some sort of frame rate, and our motion is going to be distributed amongst those frames. So let's check that out. And this will also give us a chance to introduce a bunch of the Blender interface. So I'm going to kind of split. I mean, show of hands, how many have used Blender previously? Most everybody, right? Okay, close. And so there'll be varying degrees of experience with the Blender interface. I'll try to call out the main things. If you see me doing something that's really, you had no idea what it is I just did, please, by all means, say something so I can, focus in on that a little bit. So we can go from there. But I'm going to assume a little bit of experience here in that you have used this to do some stuff previously, right? Everybody with me? Okay, great. All right, so let's look here. We got just a default file here. One of the things I always do right off the bat is make sure that the gizmos is on, so that if I click on something, I still have the ability to not use all the shortcuts. A lot of you may have already invested a lot of time, effort, and energy into learning a bunch of the Blender shortcuts. And hold on. Okay, I think everybody can hear me okay. Yeah, the shortcuts are great. Blender does lend itself to using lots of shortcuts, but I'll try to also call out the actual interface elements here that are available on screen, because it does make it a little bit less cumbersome to get some things rolling here at the beginning. But let's go ahead and make something new. What's the shortcut for a new thing?
Shift A.
Shift A, yeah. And the other thing to keep in mind is that some of the shortcuts are also going to be dependent on where the mouse is at that moment. If the mouse is over a different part of the interface, it may either do something else or not work at all. So that's important to keep in mind for those, yeah. And so let's go ahead and make a new UV sphere for now. And I have that here. And let's go ahead and save this file. File, save as. I'm just going to put this over here for now. Bless you. Okay, and when we're saving stuff here, we are saving .blend files. So default Blender file type. The thing to keep in mind is that as we move on here, sometimes we may need to save it in a slightly different fashion. So we're not going to use any external resources today, but later on when we do start using some external resources, it may be necessary to pack the resources together, then save, in order to make sure that when someone opens it on the other end, most often me, that all of the stuff you included with the file is actually in there. If you don't do that, it won't come along for the ride. Great. Okay, so let's make this ball move through space here, and then we'll start talking about the timing of it. So I'm going to come over here to the tabs. Up here, this is the outliner. That's the Blender terminology for all the stuff up here. These are all the objects. The other thing to pay attention to when I'm working and when you're also looking at other people work is what mode am I in? The mode that you're in is incredibly important for Blender in terms of what you're going to be able to do. And for the most part, we're going to be in object mode today. But the two most often used modes for right now are going to be object and edit. And then you can toggle with which key between these two modes. What's that? Tab. Toggle between those with the tab key. Let's put us between those two. We're going to stay in object mode. Great. And so over here, let's go ahead and set some keyframes. so that we can actually start moving some things in time. So over here with the object tab in this menu over here, we can start to initiate some keyframing with this button next to everything. And I'm going to keep things simple and just move them on the red axis here, the red direction. And just to make sure that everyone has this in their notes, red is which axis? X. Yellow, green is Y. And blue is Z. Okay, the good news is that's the same in every program. Like those numbers, those colors represent those axes. The bad news is that which direction those arrows face is not the same for every program, okay? And the thing that you want to remember that presents problems when you go to move things between programs, in that in Blender, Z is up, right? So the up and down axis is Z. In a lot of other programs, it's Y, but here it is Z, goes up and down. So Z is up, and then the floor, right? So anytime you have a flat thing, you represent it as a plane. That plane exists on 2 dimensions. What is the floor in Blender? How would you describe that plane? What 2 axes are the floor? That's right. The floor is XY in Blender, right? So most of the time, a lot of times, we make things that are like in a room with stuff, and so the floor is over there. Cool. Okay, great. And so let's just move it on the X. So I'm going to come over here and grab this and click over here. And down here, this allows me to change the view for any of the interface panels here. And a lot of what we're going to do today, we'll just stay in these 3 views under animation. So there's the dope sheet, right? The timeline and the graph editor. We'll just be in the timeline for a second here. And so I've set a keyframe. And now let's have some time, but not too much time. I'm going to go, you could just type 100 frames, and that's going to shorten it down to 100 frames for the whole project. Or something here is that we're going to start having things available at specific frame rates. And since you can do computation in the field. And so if I want to have the default here is going to be 24 FPS. And so for instance, if I wanted to have 6 seconds, I could just type 6 times 24, right? So down here, I just click in here and go 6 times 24, and that gives me 144 frames there. You can do that in any field and do regular arithmetic and some other stuff, some scripting-ish stuff. And so if I move the playhead over now, again, making sure that I'm in timeline view, I could move this, again, clicking on the gizmo to make sure it's locked, and I'm only moving it on the x-axis here, as opposed to just hitting, what's the shortcut to move the object? G, right? So for those of you not available, G equals grab or move. R, if you had to guess,
Rotate.
good guess. And S,
Scale.
yes, very good, right? So those are your shortcuts for these, but a lot of times today, I'm not going to use the shortcuts. I'm just going to grab the gizmo. And if you're new to this, I'd recommend using the gizmo, the axis, the 3-color axis there. Just makes it a little bit easier to be precise with everything, because here it'd be a little bit more challenging. Anyways, so I moved the object. Let me rewind and do this again. So I hit play, nothing's happening. If I move the playhead here towards the end and then move the object, watch what happens to the location X. It changes to orange here. This means that the value has changed, but there is no keyframe here in the timeline. And so if I click here, it records it to a keyframe, and now I have animation, right? In order for anything to do anything, you need 2 keyframes. If you just have one keyframe on any parameter, that's not really going to change, right? The idea of animating something is that we need it to go from one value to some other value over some period of time. And so if you only set one keyframe on the timeline, that's not, there will be no animation, no change over time. It's a single value at a single point in time. And now I have 2 values, right? And so if I were to play this now, this animates from one position to the other position on the x-axis. Let's set this up a little bit. I'm going to save again and then make this a little bit flatter. Another good shortcut here, we are going to want to render this out, and I'm going to work, well, we'll get to that in a second. Let's get back to that. I'm just going to use some of the numpad keys. You know, I went on about that before. The reason I like having a separate numpad is that in Blender, I've got 1, 3, 7, and 9 that sort of flip the view around to allow me to see these flat orthographic projections of whatever it is I'm working on. And so, especially in this case, if I hit 1, I'm seeing it from the side, and now I can hit play and sort of see that. Because it's only moving on one dimension, just sort of see it flat in 2D space, which is kind of what we want to see happen right now for this. And great. So we have one value and another value, and we're interpolating between those 2. So some good terminology here. These are keyframes, right? This is a value at a specific time. We've recorded that. The beauty of computer animation here is that we have the keyframes here and here, and then what happens in between is referred to as the tweening, right? Derived from in between. And so the tweening, when we're doing stuff in Blender for the most part, is being done by Blender, by the program, right? It's doing the tweening. It's making all of the frames that exist between here and here in order to make this look as if it's animating. If we were doing this with pen and paper, we could have a keyframe where this is where the ball is at the beginning and this is where the ball is at the end, but it would be on us to incrementally redraw the ball every frame between here and here. We'll do that next week, but for today, we'll just do this way, right? So a lot of what we're doing, we're setting the keyframes, and in between, that's referred to as the tweening. How it gets from here to here is not, there's more to that. We'll get to in a second. Just another vocabulary lesson here. So in between, how it's going in between, you know, there's the word tweening. I'll also use the mathier word of interpolation, right? How it interpolates between 2 keyframes. What happens in between those 2. Does that make sense so far? Okay. So in this case, let me, I'll hit play. Spacebar is play. Everyone's used to that. And it's moving. It's not moving at the same speed the whole time, and we'll get to that. But let's say I want this ball to move faster. How do I need to change the location of these keyframes on the timeline?
They need to be tighter together.
Yeah, right, because it's 2 locations spread out over some amount of time. And if we smush them closer together, now we are moving the same amount of space in less time. Therefore, we have to go faster. Exactly, right? And so now it'll sit there, and we cover the same amount of ground faster, right? This is I know patently obvious to many, but it's important to make sure we're all on the same page exactly how this works there. Make sense so far? Okay, great. So with that in mind, the inverse is obviously true. If we spread this out, then we'll go slower across the same amount of space. Cool. All right. So we've talked about time and space here. Let's look over here at the tweening. When I'm moving this around to look at the view, hold down the scroll wheel, sort of orbits around. But a lot of what I'm doing today is I kind of want to look at it in this flat 2D. And so the 1 key snaps the camera over to that position, the camera for the viewport. And then you can also use this if you want to flip the camera around flat so that we're in the different orthographic views. You can tell you're in an orthographic view when this is flat versus like this, where something is in perspective view. You see the icon changes up there, and so that's a good way you can tell what's happening. Over here, great. So now, this style of view where we see this diamond that represents, what does this represent? This is a keyframe. This represents, essentially a value or number. However, this does start to get hazier later on where it can represent one number. That's what it represents right now in our case, right? It's just the value for X. But this single diamond can represent multiple values. They get like packaged up into one diamond. So it depends there. But in our case, it's just one for now. Seeing them as a diamond on this timeline, this is what's referred to as the dope sheet, right? And so this style, this word comes from, when everyone's doing everything by hand, they would have a sheet with a grid like this where these were used as markers to sort of plan everything out. There had to be a lot more what amounts to pre-production if you're doing everything by hand, because you've got to draw all the pictures, right? And so that's going to take a lot of time. You don't want to draw all the pictures and then have to redraw all the pictures, right? That's incredibly time intensive. We live in a different time where now, in terms of speeding it up, if I can just change these, I don't need to redraw all the pictures. The computer recalculates all the in-between pictures just based on me moving the keyframes. Does that make sense? So this is a dope sheet style where we see the diamond on the timeline. It's a little bit confusing in Blender because it looks like this when we're in timeline view, and then also when we go to the explicit dope sheet view, it also looks like this. This is just an interface quirk. I think if I remember correctly, they just released a thing about this. The timeline mode is going to go away soon-ish here in the Blender interface so that we're left with a more clear list of ways to look at it, right? Because the timeline kind of looks like the dope sheet and it overlaps with the dope sheet thing, essentially. And so having these two things that do some very similar things is just kind of needlessly confusing. So in the future, that should be the case. The thing that's most different here and allows us to talk about the next important thing is that if we were to come over here and look at the graph editor, right? And so another good shortcut here, Control Space. Control Space takes any portion of the interface and makes it full screen. And so I really like this for the viewport to really, I just want to see the thing I'm working on without all the crud in the interface. And so I like that. And then again, it does it to whichever window the mouse is currently over. And so this is also super useful for the graph editor because you can see a little bit more of what's happening here, especially if you're on a laptop or you don't have two monitors. It makes it a lot easier to do stuff there. Make sense? Yeah? Okay, great. And so here, this allows us to look at the tweening or the interpolation, right? we set these two values, but how we get from one value to the other can be different. And we can see that happen here. So for instance, I'm going to unfold, and just look at the X location here and grab both of these, and we can change this. We can see that this is curved, right? From here to here. And by default, this is what I would write down. Ease in, ease out. By default, that's what you get. So ease in means we're gonna slowly get going, speed up, and then as we get to the next keyframe, we're gonna put on the brakes and slow down into, if we're doing it in position, slow down into the next position. The important thing you need to understand, if you don't already have this internalized, is that in the graph editor, there's important things to understand about the visual representation of movement and what actually happens. And so a curve of any kind in the graph editor equals some sort of change in speed. This is key. If you understand that concept, the graph editor becomes very useful. If you don't understand that concept, the graph editor will remain this sort of obtuse abstraction that makes it hard to understand what's going on, right? Anytime we get a curve, we're going to change. Now, that could change either way. It could mean we're speeding up, or it could mean that we're slowing down. But if there's a curve, one of those two things is happening, right? If we have a line, that means we're moving at a constant speed. It doesn't mean we're moving fast. It doesn't mean we're moving slow. It just means that however we're moving, it's not changing. It is continuing at a constant speed. Everybody with me there? Okay, so how do I manipulate this in the program? So here, if we right-click on the channel, let's look here. If we right-click on the keyframe, we have the interpolation mode, and here, this is a pretty good menu. We're just going to focus on these over here for now. Bezier means that it's going to have some sort of curve that we can manipulate. Linear is going to be just moving at a constant speed, and then moving at a, let's say, unchanging speed, so that we don't confuse it with constant, which means no move, no tweening, right? Those 2 points that we set, it's just going to stay at that point, and then as soon as we get to the other point, we're just going to teleport to the other location there, right? And so these are really important to understand. If we come back over here and control space out of this, if I were to duplicate this ball, what's the shortcut for duplicate? Shift D. Yeah. Does Control D do it too? I don't think it does.
I think mine is set to Control D then.
Okay.
Control C, V? No.
Control C, Control V will do it. Yeah. Shift D is the official. I mean, like we're pressing 2 keys here. Like it's all fast, but like Shift D is like the official duplicate, because there's duplicate and then there's instance. We'll talk about that later. But in this case, here, I just Control Z'd back to one ball, okay? And the reason this is going to work for me right now, to duplicate this ball and have the duplicate ball look like it's animating, is because I only set a keyframe on the X, okay? And so when I do that, my duplicate will continue to have those same X keyframes, but it can have its own Y and Z information. And so this is going to work for this super simple example. Later on, a lot of times you're not just setting X, you're setting X, Y, and Z information. And so in those cases, if you were to duplicate something and then move it, that's going to create a problem where it's going to snap back to the position of the other thing. It'll look like you didn't duplicate it. We're running out of time, so I'll get to that next week. But yeah, here, Shift D. Let's make sure we don't have the camera, because I'm just gonna get rid of this camera and light for now. We'll just turn in a Blender file for next week. And then so Shift D here. If I drag it and then click and let go, and I hit space, I get 2 of them. And this works for the reasons I described. Over here, I'm going to Shift D one more time. And there we go. We've got 3 of them, so we can look at the different modes of interpolation. And so by default, down here, we're going to see what we currently have selected. One of the things that I'm often toggling here, let's go ahead and do it this way. So I'll select the top one, and let's grab these keyframes and right click and make sure that those are on Bezier. I'll grab the middle one and grab the keyframes and say that these are going to be linear. See what changed there, right? This is a line now. And down here, I'll again grab the keyframes and right click and say that this is going to be constant. Yes.
Have those dynamic effects always been there? I don't remember them.
I think that's newish. Yeah. Yeah. But I don't think they've always been there. Yeah, you're right.
Can
Definitely.
you maybe show what one does, like the bounce one? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah. Let me just hit play first on these. So now we are in a situation where the point I've been working towards is this. So on the dope sheet here, sometimes it's hard to see this unless you unfold everything. We get essentially what looks like the same keyframes, no matter which ball I would select here. We have keyframe at the beginning, keyframe at the end. It's only by looking at the graph editor that we can see the difference between our different balls here as they change. I think this one, did I delete that by accident? There we go. So we got our 3 different modes and 3 different ways to get there, right? So you can see the ease in and ease out sort of starts off winning the race, then the linear one kind of catches up, and then they both hit the end at the exact same time because their keyframes are in the exact same space. Whereas the one without any tweeting or without any interpolation, that one just stays where it is and then snaps to the position at the end. Right, so this looks like that. I think it was talking about the ones further on. And so if we do this, if I make one more duplicate of this one and we're to make sure that that one is selected and right click, I'll say bounce because we'll get here eventually by hand. But if we have that, it's doing a bunch of stuff here by itself. And so we'll look at this. It's going to kind of bounce off that last position. So these things are useful as like a shorthand, but and for anything like this, it's like, if this is the bounce we need, then great. This got us there in one step. If we need to, change this or alter it, then, being able to lay out the keyframes ourselves ends up making, is more controllable that way. So that's one of them. Yeah, I think these kind of got built into some like graphic GitHub package, because now they're in like a bunch of the programs. Like you can access them all. Like
Yeah, I don't remember seeing them. That's why I asked.
it may be new in 5. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know if it's that new or not. Anyways, yeah. So more complicated mode of interpolation, but it's more of like a second level thing, right? The constant, linear, and ease are like fundamental. Everything else can be built by manipulating those 3 things, right? So there's that. Great. So we didn't have a lot of time here, but for this so this, in order to stick with our cadence of class, right? This is going to be the assignment that's going to be due Tuesday night, right? Monday, I'll start talking about next week's stuff, essentially picking up where we left off, but keep that in mind. And so for next week, like, obviously the videos will be pretty short in that, like, here's my 3 balls. Ta-da, right? There's not a lot of room for creative expression here, which is fine. I know some of you may be further along in Blender than others, but being able to manipulate these 3 things here to understand how they're changing across time is fundamental to doing this, right? And there's a bunch of gotchas here, which if you're, haven't done a lot of this before, you may really run up against. Number one that you may run into is, again, I only keyframed the X. I didn't keyframe the other values. If you do that, then you're going to run into problems when you duplicate it, right? They'll all snap back to the complete position of the original when you hit animate. And then here I'm able to manipulate the interpolation of these. So the assignment, I usually post things Thursday morning, right? And so you're working on it Thursday morning through Tuesday. Although, I mean, because things change every week and like we're incrementally working on things, like this is why I sort of post them Thursday morning based on whatever it is that we got finished that week. And so you can start working on them before, right? Because usually on Monday we'll cover most of what it is we need to get done. It's just that we'll sort of codify it on Thursday morning. And so, yeah, I'll talk a little bit more about what it is you'll be turning in on Tuesday on Monday. But it's this, right? Just this blend file. Monday we'll get to, rendering and a bunch of the other stuff I wanted to make, points I wanted to make about this. But we're down 1 day this week. So today was super, super condensed. Make sense for everybody? Cool. The class structure and way we will proceed, does that make sense for everybody? Okay. Great. Okay, well, let's call it a day then. And yeah, everybody understands that everybody was taking good notes. I want to see that happening. I strongly, if you can be here at this time, which it seems like you can, I would encourage you to continue to do so for all the reasons that I mentioned previously. Yes? And then thirdly, I don't know, have a good weekend. I forget what the third thing was I was going to say. Okay. So, yeah, it's great to meet everybody. Looking forward to a fun semester. Yeah. Sound good? Okay, great. Yes. Hold on, let me do it. Lawson, Jose, Anthony, right? Ivan, Mark, Arlinka, Amy, Crimson, Alec, Desmond, and Edward, right? Okay, good, I got it.
It takes me days.
I've worked on that, yeah.
The shorthand code doesn't work.
Yeah, it's not plugged in.
I did.
Just like that, it's not that simple. We spent an hour this morning trying to plug it in. It's like some sort of like,
So I use that.
yeah. That's that. Just go ahead and use that.